Hi, I'm Sandra Weingarten, a member of the Eugene Symphony Guild Board. For over 50 years, the Guild has worked hard to support our Eugene Symphony through our fundraising and other ways, such as supplying volunteer ushers for our youth concerts and sponsoring the Young Artist Competition and, of course, these concert previews. Our biggest fundraiser, Music in the Garden, has undergone a dramatic change this year due to COVID-19. As we prepare for our first ever virtual Music in the Garden, we realize that we're missing one important element, the personal conversations that take place on the day of the event when people share their garden stories. So we're creating a way so that we can see and hear yours. Simply make a 1 minute or less video or audio recording of your garden story, and we'll share it with you before the premiere of the event, and yours might even be included in our Music in the Garden video. For more information, just check our website, eugenesymphonyguild.org, for information on how to participate. As always, we invite you to join us as we work to support our symphony and have a lot of fun doing it. You can get more information about it from our website, again, eugenesymphonyguild.org, and new members are always welcome. And now, please join me in welcoming our Maestro, Francesco Lecce-Chong, to tell us about this Soundwaves performance.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Eugene Symphony Guild concert preview. And thanks as always to the Eugene Symphony Guild for supporting and sponsoring these pre-concert talks. I'm so delighted you've joined me for this and really excited to talk about this upcoming Soundwaves performance of the Eugene Symphony. Because really this is a performance that brings not only my obviously great love of music, but my love of films, and particularly, film music. I've conducted a lot of great film scores over the years, obviously like, the Star Wars movies, some of my favorites, really anything by John Williams, right? But then, I think I actually started with some of the classics like Casablanca. I think I did Back to the Future. I've done so many now, I've kind of lost track of them. But when I was an assistant conductor with the Milwaukee Symphony and the Pittsburgh Symphony, that was one of my jobs, was to do a lot of these movie concerts. But even before then, I'd always been particularly interested in film scoring, even thought about doing that myself once when I was a composer in college. So, as much as I've done like actual film scores while the movie is playing, which is, a wonderful thing. We've done it with the Eugene Symphony. On the other hand, that's basically just presenting the music with the movie. What I have always wanted to do is have more opportunities to take the music away from the movie and let people appreciate that music on its own. And there aren't always a lot of opportunities to do that. Most often it's going to be in a kind of, a Pops concert where you'll have like movie themes and things like that. But then, again, you're only going to get maybe, 5 minutes of a certain movie, and then you'll move on to another one. And it's kind of the best of, but you don't really get into the nitty gritty. And the thing about movie scores is that some of the best and most interesting music is the music that happens outside of the so-called like main themes, right? Like the main title of Star Wars is fantastic. But what about the music that's underneath some of those classic battle scenes that you can hardly hear because there's like, there's so much like shooting and yelling and things exploding. You don't even really hear that music as much, but it is just as intricate and exciting and as incredible as all the other music. So, it's been one of the things I've been trying to figure out is kind of how to find a really interesting way to bring film music into the concert hall in a way that we do want to hear it up against, say, a work by Dvorak, like on today's program. So the first half of the Soundwaves performance features three film composers, and just absolutely incredible composers who I think hearing their music next to each other is going to be very fascinating in this particular performance. Only one of the scores was actually written for a film, but all three of them, you'll kind of sense their style in writing for film, even if their piece wasn't written for a particular film. And through these three composers, I also kind of wanted to encompass the range of of what composers have been doing when they write for film over the years. So going back to like Psycho, 1960, Bernard Herrmann's incredible score for that. And then we're going to do some John Williams, the Air and Simple Gifts. And, John Williams for me is sort of, obviously he encompasses decades of composition. But I think, particularly dominating, say, like the 1980s and 90s. And then we're actually opening with the work by Hildur Guðnadóttir, and she just was the most recent winner of the Academy Awards. Actually, I guess not, since the Academy Awards happened like a week ago. But at any rate, she won in 2020 for the movie Joker. And she's this incredible Icelandic composer who's already won a host of awards for music for some miniseries. And I have no doubt that she's really going to be one of the voices that's going to be shaping film music in the coming decades. So it's a really fun in this program to be able to see three very different ways of approaching film music, but three composers who are able to evoke and communicate with such clarity in their music, which I think is the hallmark of a great film composer. And we're going to start. Let's start with Guðnadóttir's music, just to give you a sense of how much he is respected as a composer. When the movie Joker was filmed, they had her write music before, which is very unusual. So they had her write music and themes and ideas before the movie was even filmed, and then they would play that music for the actors. And you can go online and read some of the interviews about this and how her music inspired in spontaneous moments what ended up being in the film, and really how the actors were reacting to this music. Because when you watch the movie, there's a lot of times of just no dialogue, not a lot going on, and yet it feels so powerful and so connected to the music. But I think what's wonderful is that it wasn't filmed and then she kind of was inspired to put music in, but it started from her music. And I think that says something about the qualities that she brings to her writing. Now, we're going to be doing a piece called From the Other Place. Now, the thing about Guðnadóttir is her music is very experimental. She, works with a lot of like electronic instruments. She likes to just do a lot of like improv. Like she really is a performance artist. She likes to create things in the moment, react to things in the moment. And so there isn't a lot like, written down on paper. And she doesn't have anything particularly written for orchestra. And I've been wanting to find a way to include her in one of my programs. And finally, I found this piece From the Other Place, which is basically just a series of directions for the concept of a piece. And this has been a remarkable journey. We actually got in touch with her and made sure that she was comfortable with us turning this work into a big string orchestra piece. I think when she conceived of this work, it was going to be for about 4 or 5 people, and we're going to, we've done it with 30. So, we were expanding her idea of this piece, but it's no less wonderful and mesmerizing in how she has created a work without any specific notes on a page. All right. So let's dig into this. It really is remarkable. I've never seen a piece like this. And you've probably never heard a piece quite like this. So you can actually go online and find her kind of directions for how the piece should be created. And it's basically, it exists around the idea of a color map. So let's dive in here. Here we are. So you can just go to this website, graphicscores.com. And here you'll see this piece that she wrote, From the Other Place. And the first thing you see is this sheet with just colored dots. And the next thing you'll see is sort of a sketched out form, which has some dynamics and just some ideas on it. And then we have all the instructions down here. And this is what I had to spend a lot of time with, kind of figuring out in my head what she was actually going for. So as you can see, each color on the map represents a note. And then using the lines as guides, so following the lines between the colors, you can basically choose your own path through the map. And you do that spontaneously, and you do it different every time. So the piece never really sounds the same. On the other hand, there is a structure to it. And I think perhaps that's what I was struck most by working on this piece and getting to see us work on it. Is yes, it was different every time. The notes were slightly different every time. But the feel of the piece was actually quite similar each time, because she has sketched out sort of a basic form. And I went in there and I actually kind of rephrased certain things and kind of adjusted what she had done to make sure that there would be some clarity for 30 musicians in some of the sections, so that we could hear different things at different times. For instance, there's a part in the piece where everybody can do whatever they want for a certain amount of time, each individual player following the color map. And, while that might work well for like 5 people, I'm not sure you want to hear 30 people all doing whatever they want for, say 4 minutes. I didn't think there was quite enough there. And so what I did is I divided it so that we could hear different timbres. So we would let the violas, cellos, and basses play free for a while, and then the violins play free for a while, and so you could hear kind of different timbres come in and out of the music. But it's really an incredible piece. I don't conduct it. I just I explained how it should happen. It was a very organic process, a little scary at first, because as you all know, orchestra musicians are trained to be incredibly disciplined, right? I mean, you have to be when you got 100 people on stage all trying to do something at exactly the same time. We spend our lives honing our skills to react and try to be in sync with everyone. This is a piece where you don't want to be in sync with anybody. And in fact, even in the form sections where she asks everyone to kind of play their notes at more or less the same time, she doesn't want it all to fall exactly like this. Because one of her favorite electronic effects is that kind of that extra reverb, where as you play notes, they blend into the notes after that. And so part of what we were able to do in this piece, which actually is very cool with 30 people, is make sure not everyone changed exactly at the same time. So even as the notes shift, there's always just a little bit of overlap, and it almost creates a sensation of that kind of extra reverb. So I was really happy with how this came out, really proud of how my colleagues kind of really dug into this piece, really started to have fun with it, especially in the improvisational sections. And it's really going to be a piece unlike any other. I do think if you didn't know any better, and this is the remarkable thing, you would actually think she had written all this music down. It sounds cohesive. It makes sense, even though it's different every single time. And it says something about how she conceived of a piece like this. And I'll be curious to see if she continues in this vein and maybe writes some more works like this for an indeterminate number of performers to be able to come together and just play a piece right off the bat like this. I've never quite had an experience like this, so I think you'll really enjoy it. It's going to be unlike anything else, and on a film perspective, just to make you even more excited for this. From a filming perspective, we placed a robotic camera where I would normally stand. So right in the center of the orchestra. So some of the camera shots you'll see during this piece is basically what I get to see, which is a really fascinating kind of top-down view of the entire orchestra. So I think it'll be really fun from so many ways, acoustically and visually in this piece. So, it's the shortest piece on the program, but there's so much going on in this piece. So very, very excited that we're having a chance to kind of be the first orchestra to take on this challenge, if you will. So that's what's going to open our program. And then we're going to go back in time. We're going to go back to 1960s Psycho and the music by Bernard Herrmann. I was also very happy to have a chance to do this suite that Herrmann himself put together from Psycho. I did conduct, I want to say like maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I conducted the full score of Psycho with the movie playing. I think that was with the Houston Symphony. And that's really where I first developed my love of this score. I am not a horror movie person. In fact, I avoid them like the plague. I cannot stand them. If I ever accidentally watch a horror movie, I can't sleep for like weeks. So I don't go anywhere. But I was intrigued enough when I was offered the chance to conduct the score. I was like, well, this is a classic. I need to do this. And gradually I was able to kind of desensitize myself to some of the crazier scenes. And honestly, the movie's become such a cliche that in the actual performance of Psycho, the audience was laughing like hysterically during the kind of the so-called scarier sections of the movie because it's just become such a cliche over the years. But what hasn't become a cliche is how innovative the music is. Oh my God. I mean, Herman takes only a string section, right? None of the bells and whistles of percussion or electronics or, a wind or a brass section, God forbid. It's just a string. It's just strings. That's it. And he creates this incredible tapestry of textures and weird sounds and yet kind of like a deep romanticism at times. It's unbelievable what he encompasses in this score. And so this is really wonderful that we're able to in a real concert just give you the acoustic performance of some of this amazing music. And really, this is kind of all the music in the movie. I will say the downside of conducting Psycho is in this 90-minute movie, there's very little music. You actually spend a lot of your time just sitting there. And I think it's one of the things that makes this movie very effective is there's no such thing as background music. When Hitchcock wants music, he uses it specifically, and Herman gives him that music specifically. So there's a lot of times when the orchestra's just sitting there for long periods of time when we're not playing. And then a lot of the music is repeated, of course. So ultimately, this suite is about 15 minutes long, and it's pretty much all the music that's in the movie. But it's still important because, again, you will rarely hear this suite. What you will almost always hear is about it's about, an 7 or 8 minute kind of best of. Again, kind of the classic themes from Psycho, but not really digging into it. And ultimately, this is what Herman wanted in concert. Like, if you were to play a concert version of Psycho, he wanted this 15-minute suite because there's so much detail in it, and you really get the journey of the plot from beginning to end. Not just one of those stabbing scenes, but you actually get two of the stabbing scenes so that you can compare because they're not exactly the same. So things like that. The music, there's a lot going on in it, and there's a lot of reasons that you won't always get a sense for this piece until now, and part of it is because with movies back then, they couldn't capture the score as clearly. And so a lot of the detail that Herman puts in the music, the microphones weren't able to capture it. And so when you listen to the movie, you can't hear all that detail you want to hear. And that's what I'm really excited about, because whether you're hearing this score for the first time in a long time, or this is like one of your favorite movies, you're going to hear completely new things in this score. So just kind of innovative ways that, like, the strings, when they're like, the way they pluck their instruments. Of course, the stabbing scenes are they're ridiculous. What the orchestra looks like when they're playing those little eeks is crazy. And all kinds of interesting harmonics in the strings, a lot of like inside detail, a lot of kind of like rumbling in the low instruments that didn't get really picked up in the original movie. So I gotta say, I had an absolute blast. This was my first time getting to do Psycho as a concert piece, and I think we really dug into it. We brought out all the nuances and the drama in this piece. So excited that you'll have a chance to kind of take that journey with us through Psycho. And then we're going to finish off our first half with the music of John Williams, of this work, Air and Simple Gifts. This was a piece in its original form, actually written for the 2009 inauguration of President Barack Obama. And it was premiered by none other than Anthony McGill, Itzhak Perlman, Yo-Yo Ma, and Gabriela Montero. So four of the most famous classical musicians performing today. And then after that, John Williams was asked to create a version of it for a string orchestra. And that's what we'll be doing today. it's interesting to work on a piece that's based on Simple Gifts, the famous Shaker song, because every time I hear this tune, and it may be that way for some of you, I think of Copland's ballet Appalachian Spring, which has a very famous set of variations on Simple Gifts. And it's kind of hard to get away from that. But what I've enjoyed about working on this rather brief work is kind of realizing that Williams is having a different take on Simple Gifts. For Copland, this was a piece that celebrated the adventurous spirit of the American pioneer, and so it is free, it is wild at times, it is majestic, but it has this kind of kind of directness to it. Like, we're just going forward, and this is the piece that we're going forward with. For John Williams, I feel like he's kind of taken a modern take on this work, where he has an air, so it's a much softer, more introspective section of the work, and out of that appears the various motives that will make up Simple Gifts, and they begin to kind of appear out of the textures. But it's a work that pushes and pulls. It struggles a bit. It finds its footing. It loses it. It's a piece that doesn't simply give us simple gifts, but it makes us appreciate that unity that we're striving towards. And I think it's an interesting concept. I think and how he makes that happen on a musical level. So I think this has been really fun to work on a piece that I know the melody so well, but it's a different feel to this work entirely. It still has that same optimism, and in many ways I think it has more hope behind it. There's not a settled feeling to it, but it's definitely a forward-looking piece. It's a simple gifts that we can aspire to, not a simple gifts that we're looking back on. So this has been a wonderful piece to be able to put together, and I think you'll all enjoy hearing this, whether you heard it before in 2009 or you're going to appreciate it now for the first time, or the first time in its string orchestra version. It's a beautiful and lush work. Which brings us to the second half and Dvorak's Serenade. So, we had three composers in the first half writing for strings, film composers writing for strings, and each of them have a more modern take on the orchestra and how to use the string section. But despite all of that, of course, they are deeply rooted in the classics, right? And how orchestras, played back in the day, like the big romantic sound of the strings, and things that we've done in the past, like the Elgar Serenade, for instance. There's the Tchaikovsky Serenade, these great romantic works for the string section that really embraced the lyricism of the instruments, the full range of these instruments. And so each of these, the film composers, they're still deeply connected to that, even as they are exploring new sounds and new ways for the string instruments to communicate. So I think it's fun to kind of go back then at the end of this program and go to one of the classics. The funny part about a piece called Serenade for me always is these are supposed to be lovely, entertaining, lighter works, right? We're not calling these symphonies. It's a serenade. And this is a piece from 1875 by Dvorak. He was recently married, just had his first son. This is a very happy time in his life. And the piece is very sunny and wonderful. And there's so many just breathtakingly gorgeous moments in this piece. However, it is insanely difficult. It's as intricate, if not more intricate, than Dvorak's symphonies, and what he asks from the string section, the amount of detail, the amount of background rhythmic activity that happens in this piece. Even when there's like some gorgeous melody, there's always something going on underneath. Some of the harmony changes are stunning, and there's just a lot going on in this piece. So as you sit back and enjoy this wonderful work and all of its, romanticism and its fun and its humor, just realize there's also, a lot going that makes this piece so special. And it really does challenge the string section. Requires a lot of virtuosity to pull it off over the course of its 5 movements. It's also kind of the way it's laid out, I always find is very interesting. You have this moderato opening, and again, it's sort of the same thing, like these beautiful long lines in the strings. This is the movement that makes you feel like, okay, this is a serenade, very light and very free. And then the second movement is a waltz, and this waltz is really intense. I always feel like the second movement is where you realize, okay, Dvorak's having a great time, and he's gonna dig in a little bit in this movement. And after this whole beautiful first section of the waltz, the middle section of this waltz gets quite aggressive, quite wild, as things are kind of passed around, and these really kind of sharp accents throughout the middle of the section before returning to restate the entire waltz again. So it's actually quite a long movement. There's a lot of intricacy going on in that. And then we get a scherzo, really fun, really fast. And then a larghetto, which, for me, just absolute hallmark Dvorak slow movement. If you think about the famous English horn melody from the New World Symphony, this is exactly kind of in that same vein. And then a finale that is boisterous, again, incredibly virtuosic, and what makes it so difficult is even in its lightest moments and its fun and free moments, there's a drive and an intensity to it that everyone really just has to kind of stay on this wire throughout this entire piece, and really keep things moving forward. I think it's also really, really delightful and unnecessary but fun that at the end of this movement, Dvorak actually quotes the first movement. And we have this moment actually where he quotes kind of the last 30 seconds or so from the first movement. And you think that, okay, are we just going to finish this piece in kind of the fun, light way that the first movement finished? And then, of course, there's a little surprise at the end that is fantastic. But it's kind of cute how Dvorak kind of ties a little bow on this piece as it finishes. So I hope that gives you a sense for what to expect in this next Soundwaves performance. There's a lot going on with it, but it's great fun. I think it's a really unusual program, but I have to say it's one that I particularly enjoyed. I think it might be one of my most favorite programs I've conducted in a while, just because the amount of variety and the stories that each piece tells. So we'll look forward to seeing you from stage for this wonderful Soundwaves performance, and thank you so much for joining me, everyone.